boycotting the upcoming World Cup games in the US. The local World Cup committee has been expecting hundreds of thousands of visitors to travel to the metro when the matches kick off in 5 months. Calls are growing louder in the United Kingdom for England and Scotland to boycott the 2026 FIFA World Cup that is set to be co-hosted by the United States in months from now. World Cup 2026 was designed to be the largest tournament the sport has ever staged, a 48-team spectacle spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. With 104 matches on the calendar and billions in projected revenue. Yet, as preparations accelerate, the conversation surrounding it feels less like pre-armament excitement and more like a referendum on politics, power, and the boundaries between sport and state influence. Instead of tactical debates and squad projections dominating headlines, parliaments, civic groups, and former football executives are weighing whether participation itself carries consequences that extend far beyond the pitch. And that shift in tone has created an atmosphere unlike anything seen in recent tournament cycles. Public pressure first surged in the Netherlands, where more than 150,000 citizens signed a petition urging their national team to stay home in 2026, a number that ranks among the largest football-related civic actions in Dutch history. The petition, initiated by a well-known journalist, framed the issue in terms of symbolism, arguing that players could be placed in a position where their presence might be interpreted as endorsement of political decisions made in Washington. The Royal Dutch Football Association, the KNVB, has stopped short of endorsing any boycott and continues to assess developments. Yet the sheer scale of signatures demonstrates how deeply the debate has penetrated public consciousness. In a country where football typically unites rather than divides, Germany has encountered comparable turbulence. CDU parliamentarian Jürgen Hart openly suggested that Berlin should reconsider participation under certain geopolitical circumstances, bringing a foreign policy lens directly into the sporting conversation. The German Football Association under President Bernd Neuendorf has formally rejected a boycott for now, but influential voices inside the game remain uneasy. Okay. Gudish, Vice President of the Federation and Chairman of FC Sancti, has advocated for serious reflection rather than automatic compliance. A nationwide survey of 1,000 Germans found that 47% would back a boycott if the United States were to annex Greenland, illustrating how hypothetical diplomatic escalations are shaping public opinion months before qualifying campaigns even conclude. France has adopted a steadier tone. Amalie Oudéa Castéra, president of the French National Olympic and Sports Committee, has indicated that withdrawal is not currently under review, emphasizing preparation and competitive integrity. Belgium has echoed that position and focused on football operations rather than political commentary. In the United Kingdom, members of parliament have been more outspoken. Conservative MP Simon has urged England, Scotland, and Wales to consider boycott as a means of political protest, while Liberal Democrat MP Luke Taylor has argued that public pressure can influence international behavior. In France, Eric Coquerel of La France Insoumise has proposed relocating hosting duties entirely to Canada and Mexico, a suggestion that reflects how the debate now extends into legislative chambers rather than remaining confined to sports media. Even former leaders of the global game have entered the discussion. Sepp Blatter, once president of FIFA and largely absent from public discourse since leaving office, voiced support for Swiss legal scholar Mark Path's call for fans to reconsider traveling to the United States for the tournament. Although Blatter no longer wields institutional authority, his endorsement added symbolic weight to a movement that questions whether attendance itself carries political implications. Immigration enforcement inside the United States has become a central concern in this debate. Expanded travel restrictions have affected several countries expected to compete in 2026, and reports of stricter visa scrutiny have circulated widely among federations. During preparations for the 2025 Club World Cup, members of Iran's delegation reportedly encountered visa obstacles, with only 4 of 9 officials receiving approval to attend the December 2025 draw. Separate incidents involving asylum seekers detained near Matife Stadium during that event intensified worries about how visiting supporters might be treated. Fans traveling from regions across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East have begun factoring entry uncertainty into their planning, and that layer of unpredictability complicates what should be straightforward logistical preparation. Geopolitical developments have amplified those anxieties. President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to assert control over Greenland, an autonomous territory of Denmark and a NATO partner, and has floated tariffs of 10% on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. Public statements suggesting that Canada could become the 51st state and warnings of potential military action involving Mexico have strained relations with the very countries sharing hosting responsibilities. Each diplomatic flashpoint feeds a narrative that the tournament may unfold amid heightened international tension rather than cooperative celebration. That narrative intensified sharply on January 3, 2026, when Operation Absolute Resolve was carried out in Venezuela. Official statements indicated that more than 150 U.S. military aircraft participated in the operation, resulting in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife, who were transported to New York for trial. Reports stated that 32 Cuban soldiers were killed while attempting to defend Maduro. The United States subsequently announced it would administer Venezuela, triggering immediate and polarized global reactions. Supporters characterized the move as decisive intervention, while critics described it as the unprecedented detention of a sitting head of state and a destabilizing development in international law. With such events unfolding in real time, the approaching World Cup inevitably began to be viewed through a wider geopolitical frame. Institutional signals from Washington and FIFA have further shaped perception. In March 2025, the White House established a task force dedicated to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, chaired by President Trump with Vice President J.D. Vance serving as vice chair and Andrew Giuliani appointed executive director. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has appeared alongside administration officials on multiple occasions, underscoring close coordination. Symbolism reached a peak during the Club World Cup final on July 13, 2025, when President Trump, who had kept the tournament trophy in the Oval Office since March, remained on stage as Chelsea celebrated victory and received a replica while the original stayed in Washington. Broadcast images showed players such as Cole Palmer and Reece James navigating an unusual ceremony as Trump placed a medal into his suit pocket. The footage circulated globally and reinforced impressions that the sports imagery was intersecting with political theater. Infantino's relationship with the administration has also drawn attention. He attended events at Mar-a-Lago on election night in November 2024 and was present at the presidential inauguration on January 20, 2025, where he spoke about collaboration on a global scale. FIFA opened an office inside Trump Tower in July 2025. On December 5, 2025, during the World Cup draw, Infantino presented President Trump with the inaugural FIFA Peace Prize titled "Football Unites the World" following Trump's role in a Congo-Rwanda peace agreement. And days after renewed remarks regarding Greenland, several FIFA Council members reportedly learned of the award through a press release, prompting human rights organization Fair Square to file a complaint with FIFA's Ethics Committee. Infantino defended the recognition and later announced that President Trump would present the World Cup trophy to the champions on July 19, 2026. These developments have fueled concern that the tournament ceremonies and global broadcasts could become intertwined with political messaging. Supporters of the event counter that consistency should guide reactions, noting that previous tournaments proceeded despite controversy. The 1980 Moscow Olympics faced a U.S.-led boycott over the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, yet the Soviet Union hosted the Games. The 1978 World Cup took place in Argentina under a military dictatorship amid intense ethical debate. The 2018 tournament unfolded in Russia after the annexation of Crimea. The 2022 edition went forward in Qatar despite sustained criticism over labor practices and migrant worker deaths. And FIFA has already awarded the 2034 tournament to Saudi Arabia amid ongoing human rights concerns. From this perspective, isolating 2026 could appear selective rather than principled. Economic stakes add another layer of complexity. FIFA projects that the 2026 tournament will generate approximately $10 billion in revenue and create more than 290,000 jobs in the United States alone. 78 matches are scheduled across American cities, with 13 in Canada and 13 in Mexico. Broadcasters, sponsors, apparel manufacturers, and national associations have committed significant resources to a competition expanded to 48 teams and 104 matches for the first time. Infrastructure projects are underway, contracts are signed, and training programs are advancing. An assessment by the Washington Post suggested that the probability of a full-scale boycott remains extremely low, reflecting the financial and logistical momentum behind the event. Even so, the conversation has evolved beyond balance sheets and broadcast rights. The central tension revolves around whether a tournament of this magnitude can unfold insulated from the political climate surrounding its primary host, or whether the images beamed to billions will inevitably carry meanings beyond goals and trophies. European petitions, parliamentary debates, visa concerns, military operations, and symbolic gestures have converged into a single question that will shadow every qualifying match and planning session in the months ahead. As teams prepare and organizers finalize schedules, the broader world watches closely, aware that when the opening whistle blows in 2026, the tournament will test not only competitive excellence, but also the fragile boundary between global sport and geopolitical power. Moreover, financial projections and attendance estimates have done little to quiet the growing unease surrounding the 2026 World Cup. Because while spreadsheets may promise record revenues and packed stadiums, the political backdrop has introduced a layer of uncertainty that numbers cannot erase. Canada and Mexico, co-hosts of the tournament, now find themselves navigating sensitive diplomatic terrain as the spotlight intensifies. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has had to respond to rhetoric from Washington about annexation, language that lands differently when two nations are preparing to welcome the world together. Mexican officials have also voiced concern after warnings of potential unilateral military action, creating a climate where cooperation exists alongside visible strain. Inside the United States, some lawmakers have raised questions about whether aggressive immigration enforcement during the tournament could damage the country's global image at the exact moment it hopes to project openness and leadership. Analysts have pointed to the January 2026 military operation in Venezuela as a development that could ripple far beyond the region, arguing that such actions might offer rhetorical cover for other powers seeking to justify interventions of their own. With comparisons drawn to Russia's actions in Ukraine and China's posture toward Taiwan. When global sporting events unfold against that kind of geopolitical tension, they inevitably absorb part of the surrounding narrative. Human rights organizations, including Human Rights Watch, the ACLU, and the NACP, have cautioned that tournaments of this scale can become stages for political messaging, whether organizers intended or not. Their focus has centered on the protection of players and supporters, emphasizing that safety, freedom of expression, and equal treatment must remain central priorities. Behind closed doors, football executives are reportedly weighing contractual obligations and commercial commitments against the reputational risks that come with hosting an event under intense scrutiny. Public opinion remains fluid, shifting with each headline, each visa dispute, and each diplomatic statement amplified across social media platforms that move faster than any official press release. Grassroots campaigns continue to gather signatures across Europe, reflecting a broader debate about the role of athletes in moments of political tension. Some supporters of participation argue that players should not be forced to shoulder the burden of geopolitical protest after dedicating their lives to reaching the sport's highest stage. Others respond that silence on such a platform can be interpreted as approval, especially when billions are watching. That friction between principle and participation has rarely felt sharper because the stakes extend beyond trophies and into questions about values and visibility. History offers examples of alternatives to outright withdrawal. During the 1978 World Cup in Argentina, Dutch player Wim Riesebeeren visited Plaza Dallo to show solidarity with the mothers of the disappeared under the military dictatorship, demonstrating that presence on the field did not prevent moral expression off it. At Quar 2022, members of the German national team covered their mouths during a pre-match photo in protest of the One Love armband ban, sending a message that traveled around the globe within minutes. In Brazil during the 1980s, the Corinthians club became associated with a democratic movement that challenged military rule from within the sport itself, illustrating that participation can coexist with visible dissent when athletes and organizations choose to act. World Cup 2026 carries enormous symbolic weight because of its structure and scale. It spans 3 nations across North America, introduces an expanded 48-team format that will reshape the competition, and is projected to generate approximately $10 billion in revenue while creating more than $290,000 jobs in the United States alone. 78 matches are scheduled in American cities, with 13 in Canada and 13 in Mexico, creating a continental footprint unlike any previous edition. At the same time, the tournament unfolds amid immigration crackdowns, tariff threats, territorial disputes, and a high-profile military intervention that continues to divide international opinion. Institutional alignment has added another dimension. A White House task force dedicated to the tournament is chaired by the sitting president, and FIFA President Gianni Infantino has maintained a visible relationship with that administration. It has already been publicly stated that Donald Trump will personally present the World Cup trophy to the champions on July 19, 2026, a detail that reinforces how closely the political and sporting spheres appear to be intersecting in this particular cycle. For critics, that imagery raises concern about whether the event can maintain the perception of neutrality that global competitions traditionally seek to project. Even if European teams ultimately decide to compete rather than boycott, the debate itself has already reshaped the environment in which the tournament will take place. Football federations are no longer insulated from foreign policy discussions, and fans are examining visa rules and diplomatic rhetoric with the same intensity once reserved for lineup announcements. Sponsors are calculating reputational exposure alongside projected market gains, aware that brand association in a politically charged climate can carry long-term consequences. Success in 2026 will not be measured solely by goals scored or attendance records, but by whether the event can avoid widening existing political divides. The broader issue touches on the concept of soft power, which has long been woven into international sport through opening ceremonies, cultural showcases, and host nation storytelling. The current dispute forces a deeper examination of how far that soft power can extend before it begins to resemble overt political messaging rather than subtle influence. Between June 11th and July 19th, 2026, global attention will focus not only on tactics and celebrations, but also on governments, institutions, and the decisions they make under pressure. The tournament will serve as a measure of how deeply political influence can penetrate international sport and whether federations, players, and supporters are willing to define boundaries when that influence feels overwhelming. That brings the focus to the wider football community and the choices that may define this tournament long before a ball is kicked. If political tensions escalate further, would refusing to participate send a message strong enough to matter? Or would competing while making a clear and visible statement carry more impact on a stage watched by billions? Could a boycott truly shift policy? Or would it end up costing athletes the defining moment they have worked toward for decades? And if teams do take the field, what form of principled expression would resonate without being reduced to symbolism? Add your thoughts in the comments because this discussion reaches far beyond officials and federation executives and into the heart of the fan base that gives the sport its meaning. If this analysis brought value, consider liking the video so the conversation reaches a broader audience. Subscribe for ongoing coverage that digs into the collision between sport and global power. Turn on notifications to stay updated on the next in-depth breakdown.